Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this morning. We are here to talk about building thriving communities. So we're here to help you unlock Brownfield technical assistance and funding with a special focus on the Thriving Communities Grantmaker programs in Region 9. So I'll give a moment for everyone to kind of trickle in as we're expecting a good-sized audience today. Hi, everyone. Welcome in if you're just joining us. We're kind of taking a moment to let everyone join and get settled before we get started. While everyone is joining, we're so happy to have you all here, and we'd love to know who's with us. So as you're joining, why don't you go ahead and put your name in the chat, say where you're from. You can share the organization you're joining from if you'd like, but we'd really love to see who's joining us from across Region 9. All right, and we can go ahead and get started. So again, thank you so much for joining us for our webinar titled Building Thriving Communities. We're here to help you unlock Brownfield technical assistance and funding with a special focus on the Thriving Communities Grantmakers programs that are available for Region 9. This webinar today is being presented by the Center for Creative Land Recycling, also known as CCLR or CCLR for short, also in partnership with Wells Fargo. And we are welcoming guest speakers from each of the organizations that are shown on this screen. So we're very excited to have everyone here. I said this at the beginning, but as you're joining, please put your name in the chat, say where you're from. You can share the organization you're joining from. We just like to welcome all of you and see who's joining us. I'd also like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out the recording and slides within the next few days. As well as introducing yourself as we go through the webinar, you can put your questions in the chat or hold them for a Q&A session that we'll have at the end of the presentation. So like I've said, we've got a full house today, and we're joined by a great group of speakers and special guests. So they'll say hello, take themselves off camera as they go around. But I'll start with myself. My name is Devin Rainwater, and I'm a program manager at CCLR. I work primarily with municipalities and communities in Region 9 as a technical assistance provider, as CCLR is a TA provider for both Regions 9 and 10. Araceli Centeno is joining us from Liberty Hill, which is Region 9's dedicated Thriving Communities Grantmaker. Iris Gonzalez is also here to share some information with us regarding the National Thriving Communities Grantmaker program. Climate Justice Alliance and Unite EJ serve as the Thriving Communities Grantmaker for Regions 8, 9, and 10. The special guests joining us today are Michelle Mukeli, who is representing the Environmental Protection Network, which is an organization that provides technical assistance resources to thriving communities, grantmakers, or TCGM, as I'll now refer to them, applicants as part of the larger technical assistance services that they offer. We also have Melissa Garcia, who is here on behalf of the West EJ Center. They're one of Region 9's Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, also known as TICTAC for short, since that's a long name as well. Lauren Halili is also here from the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice, also known as CJ, and they are also a Region 9 TICTAC. Paige Dawson is also joining us from CJ, so she's in the audience to answer any questions as well. Both of the TICTACs also offer TA services for TCGM applicants, and they're here to support you. So we'll hear about them more later on. Anina Tweed is also here from Wells Fargo, who is our partner in presenting this webinar. Anina, if you're prepared and would like to share a few words, the floor is yours. Let's see, Anina, maybe Anina is not ready to share with us yet, but she's here. Thank you so much to Wells Fargo for partnering with us in this webinar. Um, all right, so here's our agenda for the rest of the webinar. So as a reminder, we'll have a question and answer session, but put your questions in the chat. And we will end at 15 minutes past the hour, so 11:15 a.m. Pacific time, which is my time. And coming up, we'll get into some background on what brownfields are and how to take on land reuse. And we'll also talk about the importance of equity in the redevelopment process. And then we'll transition into a discussion on the launch of the new Thriving Communities programs. As we go through the webinar, we'll share all of the linked resources in the chat, as well as in a follow-up email, so you can access those links that you see in the presentation. So before we dive into some of the meat of the presentation and definitions and methodologies, I wanted to get us grounded in the conversation on land reuse and kind of take you on a little walk through town to visualize some community needs and what brownfields might mean in your community and start thinking about how this can apply to your own work. So this is a partial map of Oakland, California, where I live and am presenting to you from today. So I thought this would be a perfect backdrop to our hypothetical stroll as we go through communities. So imagine yourself walking through your own neighborhood and think of what you might see in town. So this is us as we start walking. And in our walk, we might see areas that are susceptible to flooding. There might be flat paved streets with limited or blocked storm drains. We might also feel the sun beating down on us, especially in our Region 9 states, hitting the asphalt and raising the air temperature around us. We also might see empty lots next to residential buildings, and we may see empty buildings adjacent to these vacant lots. We may wish that there were more buses and access points for public transit. And we also may wish for more affordable housing so that our neighbors can, and as well as us, can stay in the neighbors or in the neighborhoods where we grew up. We may also wish for healthcare infrastructure that's more easily accessible. All of these things are needs that CClear, as well as our TikToks that I just introduced, have heard from communities themselves in one-on-one technical assistance. These are pressing issues of public health, climate change, and infrastructure. And of course, due to histories of redlining, these issues are more present in lower income communities of color. These are also issues that can be addressed through land cleanup, reuse, and revitalization. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is a brownfield? It can be a vacant or underutilized property with the potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant, which complicates the reuse of the site. It's also important to emphasize that there only needs to be some perceived presence of contaminants for something to be considered a brownfield and for it to access federal funding. I also want to acknowledge, as I said before, that there is a disproportionate burden of brownfields in disadvantaged low-income communities due to the unregulated rise in industrialization in past decades. Throughout the history of many of our communities, land use laws drove polluting industries into marginalized neighborhoods, which caused long-lasting impacts because of the contaminants and pollutants introduced, such as asbestos, leaking fuel tanks, uncontrolled wastewater disposal, and more, which led to the creation of brownfields. So these sites can exist everywhere, and land recycling can really help to mitigate these environmental injustices by centering the communities that are directly affected by brownfields, and then increase the access to resources for redevelopment and reuse, which we'll talk about later on. Sites like this can include shuttered gas stations, abandoned factories, oil drilling sites, old parking lots, dry cleaners, and so much more. So as we have kind of gone through this, I would like to test your own knowledge about brownfields. So I'll show you a picture of a site, and then I'd love for you to type true in the chat if you think it is a brownfield site, or false if you think it's not a brownfield. And then I'll talk a little bit about why this might be the case. Right. Okay, so here is An abandoned gas station in Middlefield, USA. Is this a brownfield? True or false? Okay, I see a lot of trues coming in the chat. True, true. Okay, true. All right, so we seem to be in agreement here. Yes, this is a brownfield. It is abandoned and no longer in use, and there is very likely contamination given that it was used as a gas station. And there also might be underground storage tanks that are lurking underground and potentially leaking into the surrounding soil. Okay, so this site, is this orchard a brownfield? True or false? Go ahead and type your answers into the chat. I see some trues, I see false. Some good questions. Were pesticides used? Really good to be thinking about that. Okay, I see some good ideas, pesticide use. Yes, so this is true. This site is also a brownfield. It can be kind of a tricky question because of the common conception about how brownfields are supposed to look. They can often look like the picture in the previous slide, but it's important to remember that agricultural sites that have the potential use of pesticide and herbicide can also be considered a brownfield due to the potential presence of contamination. So I'd like to talk a bit about the effects of brownfields and also what they can become. They can diminish quality of life for residents, and they can create public health issues, but they can also become a community benefit. So by revitalizing a brownfield site, we can mitigate the effects of climate change by reducing sprawl, conserving open space, and increasing climate resilient infrastructure such as rain gardens or living roofs. We can also provide affordable housing, increase public parks, reduce contamination in the area, which then improves public health conditions. And we can also create jobs by increasing retail space in a community, for example. So here are going to be a few examples of what brownfields were and what they were able to become. So this is again to inspire you to understand how this can happen in your own community. We have an industrial factory that was turned into parks, housing, and businesses with a mixed-use design. Like I mentioned before, agricultural sites can be brownfields that can be reused, for example, into senior housing. Also, waterfront and industrial sites can be reused into parks. This is an example from San Francisco, Bayview Hunters Point, that just had this park open in October of this year. And as we saw, shuttered gas stations are brownfields that can also become, you can creatively reuse the buildings that exist there, as they did here with this welcome center and also an EV charging station. So these project successes are measured through the success of the reuse, which was what I just talked about. So we also want to talk about the process of getting to this reuse success and recognize the successes that can happen along the way. This can really look like incorporating equity through the land reuse process. Equitable redevelopment practices promote fairness and justice, improve conditions for future generations, and can heal or begin to heal relationships between people and the land. So current federal programs, as well as local initiatives and general changes surrounding land reuse are really increasing the attention on the need to incorporate equitable development principles into our work and address the equity gaps within the brownfield reuse process. The principles on the screen here came out of CCLAR's close work with Groundwork USA, which is an organization dedicated to equity and land reuse. It's important to be aware of these principles as you begin your revitalization projects and incorporate these principles at each step of the way. So these include principles such as sharing leadership and decision-making power with residents, learning and acknowledging the history of racial and social injustices in the area that you're working in, and really understanding that the local knowledge is very important research and data to have in your projects. meet people where they're at. If they hang out a lot at local farmers market, go there with your projects and ideas. And you really want to build intentional partnerships using all of these principles as well. So as we get closer in this webinar to talking about the funding sources that we use and also that are available right now with the TCGMs, I wanted to get us situated in the steps to redevelopment. This is definitely not a linear process, and you can pick up this process at any point in your project. It does not always happen in order, but these are the 5 major components to any brownfields project. So you want to start with establishing your team, pulling together stakeholders, working with community groups, and a community liaison, as well as understanding information about the community that you're working in. And then you want to develop a site inventory and select sites for reuse. You want to have done your work so far and making connections with the community and becoming aware of the needs of the community, using mapping tools, surveys, and conducting research to identify properties that can best meet the needs for redevelopment. Then you'll have a better idea of what your reuse looks like, which is important for determining funding sources, as well as what's needed for site assessments. The next step is going into assessments. You'll need to evaluate the features of the property, including buildings and contaminants that are present. And you can also access free EPA resources to do this initial site assessment using the Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. Then you need to complete your plan for reuse and do site visioning, again, engaging with the community. And it's important to involve the community at this point to incorporate barriers for displacement. So the reuse of your site is intended for the current community's benefit, and anti-displacement measures should really be in place. Then you move into implementation, where the site is cleaned up and development begins. Now we're moving into funding sources. So one of the biggest unknowns that may prevent a community from pursuing redevelopment is funding. So the programs here are specifically for brownfield remediation and redevelopment, and come from EPA at the federal level. The Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program provides cost-free technical assistance through EPA contractors who come to conduct assessment activities, determine what the cleanup process can look like for a site. And this program is available locally and on a rolling basis. And unlike a grant, it does not require a lengthy application process. You just need to fill out the online application, which we'll also link in the chat for Region 9. MARC grants. So MARC stands for Multi-Purpose Assessment, Revolving Loan Fund, and Cleanup. And these are the 4 types of grants that are offered annually from the EPA Brownfields Office. These grants can cover site assessment, site cleanup, planning activities, and community engagement, and more. And states and tribes are also encouraged to apply for these funds. Not every grant is offered every year, and the amount of funding available can change each year. So it's important to stay up to date with your technical assistance providers on what's available. So you can also stack your EPA brownfield funding with these other programs. These programs can fund aspects of brownfield redevelopment, but are not necessarily specific to brownfields. Some of these funding sources may be more general and support projects that reduce pollution, increase community climate resilience, and build community capacity to address climate justice challenges. So you can see here we have the Thriving Communities Grantmakers. They're absolutely a resource to stack brownfield funding, and we'll be talking about with them today. And you can also view the Justice 40 Accelerator tool for a very broad list of funding sources that you can use as well. So on this slide, these are funding sources that can specifically support parks and green space development. Brownfield activities may qualify under these opportunities as well, because parks are a large part of brownfield reuse. You can see also that the Thriving Communities program is on this slide as well, as parks are involved in this sub-grant program as well. These resources can help you to supplement your reuse funding, and I'll also share a few more guides to parks funding in the follow-up email after this webinar, and all of these links are going to be available in the chat. All right. So with that, I am now ready to open the stage to Araceli Centeno from Liberty Hill to present information on our Thriving Communities Grantmakers program for Region 9. Thank you so much, Araceli.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. As Devin said, my name is Araceli Centeno. I am the Program Director for Thriving Communities Grantmaking Program, or TCGM, at Liberty Hill Foundation. And Liberty Hill Foundation is one of the 5 EPA, Region 9 Grantmaker partners. The purpose of this presentation is really to provide high-level information on the Thriving Communities Grantmaking Program, provide information on how this program may specifically benefit brownfield projects, and inform you on the application process. So I will be sharing a lot of information. So just try, to take in as much as possible. And I believe at the end of this webinar, these slides will be shared. So you don't have to take copious notes right now. Just let it all sink in. So also at the end of my portion of this presentation, I will provide information on how to reach me and reach folks in Region 9. So what is Thriving Communities Grant Program, or TCGM, which is how I'll be referring to it moving forward. And really, this is a collaboration between the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and local grant makers. It is designed to support and empower local organizations to tackle environmental challenges and make really lasting impact in the communities that need it the most. We can go to the next slide. Great. So it is a collaboration between US EPA and 11 grant makers around the nation. So if you can, take a look at that map, there's 11, there's actually 10 regions, but 11 grant makers around the nation. And really the purpose of the program is to reduce the burden of the federal grant application process and distribute federal funds to protect to potential applicants working to address environmental justice issues. So these grants will support capacity building, increase efficiency, reduce barriers, and really encourage meaningful community involvement in the decision-making process that really, for those folks that are, especially for folks that are directly affected by environmental justice issues in their communities. And so while the program is in effect throughout the nation, I will be focusing on Region 9. So Region 9 encompasses the states of California, Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, the Pacific Islands of Guam, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. But also it includes over 100, well, actually 148 tribal nations. This is a pass-through subgrant program, and Region 9 expects to sub-award $48 million in the next 3 years. And it's also important to note here, I think it's already been mentioned that the TICTACs, or the Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers, are also part of the team, and you will be learning more about them later on in this webinar. Right, next. Thank you. So in the previous slide, I did mention that this grant supports environmental justice projects. And so it is essential to touch upon the EPA's definition of what is environmental justice. So and environmental justice is the treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of income, race, national origin, tribal affiliation, disability, in the decision-making process that really affects human health, human health and the environment. Meaningful involvement includes the creation of opportunities for the public to share information, concerns, or be involved in the decision-making process. It's also a way for the community to consider input as part of the process and encourage the involvement of persons and communities that are directly affected by environmental justice issues. So I encourage you all to visit the link that is on the slide for additional information on environmental justice and the environmental justice executive orders, which are the nexus in the creation of this program. We'll go to the next. Great. So here are the four goals for TCGM. And so considering the tenets of environmental justice, which I just mentioned, the grant makers have four goals. In the same way that we want to reduce the environmental burden in communities directly affected by environmental and health issues, the grant makers wish to reduce the burden that federal grants can have and often have on CBOs and other agencies. So we want to ensure funding is also reaching under-resourced communities by designing accessible and equitable processes for grant applicants in the applications, and foster collaboration between funders, CBOs, institutions of higher learning, including universities and colleges, but also extending those collaborations with public officials, media outlets, and other partners. Next. All right, so I have already mentioned that this Region 9 is comprised of a partnership. And so there are 5 grant makers, which, we are the ones that are forging efforts in this region. And the grant makers that you see here in the slide are all responsible for the implementation of the infrastructure to streamline the award process. We are involved in a consensus process to build all the components that will allow the subgrants to be awarded. I'll start with social and environmental entrepreneurs, also known as SEE, and this is our lead grant maker in Region 9. And their role is akin to that of a fiscal sponsor. So they do facilitate partner meetings and in general are the motor of this partnership. Each grant maker is responsible for a geographic specific region or rather area within Region 9. So we also have, as part of the partnership, Community Foundation for Southern Arizona. They cover all of Arizona. We have the International Community Foundation, and they are covering Imperial, San Diego, and Orange County. We have a Resource Legacy Fund, and I notice a lot of folks are joining us from Northern California, Central California. So this is your grant maker. They cover California, all the other California counties that I haven't mentioned. They also cover the U.S. island territories of Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And yours truly, from Liberty Hill, we will be covering LA County. And so, as I did mention, that this region includes Nevada and tribal nations. And so all of us collectively are responsible for Nevada and tribal nations. So that's, we're dividing that up amongst ourselves. A quick note, so we are working hard to build the infrastructure in this program, and we're also troubleshooting in real time. So, we are kind of in a way building the proverbial airplane while we try to fly it. So we're all learning and learn from your questions. And so we do ask that you ask us questions and give us that grace to figure some things out as we go through this process. Next. Very important, right? So who is eligible for these awards and who is not eligible? So here's a list of those that are eligible. And that includes nonprofit organizations, includes C3s and C4s, philanthropic and civic organizations with nonprofit status, tribal governments, local governments. Recently, we've been getting a lot of questions about school districts. And yes, school districts are considered local governments and are eligible to apply. Institutions of higher education, Native American organizations are also eligible entities. Ineligible folks, that includes for-profit businesses, individuals, and state governments. Go to the next one. So one of the great things about this program, and for me, it's one of the most beautiful parts of this program, is that there is a range of projects that can apply. Oh, I think we lost the presentation.
Whoops, so sorry about that.
No
Let me
worries.
get that back up.
No worries. I can continue talking about the different projects. So, so the list that will be coming up for you shortly here. is not an all-inclusive list. The projects will vary depending on each community's needs. Projects can range from those that address, perfect, thank you, air quality to job training, to any projects that may reduce greenhouse gases, to general environmental justice training, to small cleanup projects, to lead and asbestos abatement. So there's, these are just examples, and they can vary. And as grant makers, we're very aware that they will have to vary because each area is different, each community is different. And so, in the spirit of environmental justice, these projects will reflect the needs of the community. Next. Great. So let's move on to what are some of the grant amounts and project tiers. So grant amounts are based on the classification of project types, which applicants will indicate in their application. So for tier 1 projects will consist of grants of up to $150K for assessments. And so these could include activities such as testing, monitoring, surveying, and public education. For tier 2, projects can receive subawards of up to $250K, and these could be projects that are, that can be between a year to 2 years. And these are projects that would implement planning activities. So partnership building, this is where coordination with community stakeholders to address environmental issues might come up. Projects and activities to spur community involvement, but also smaller land purchases and acquisitions, which is a unique aspect of TCGM. And for tier 3 projects, these awards could be up to $350, and these are 2-year projects for project development and implementation. So once again, these also may include smaller land purchases and acquisitions that specifically require less than half of the total amount of subgrant funding, but they can also include blueprints for construction or cleanup projects, schematics, or technical development. We can go to the next one. Great. So for the following slides, I will provide examples of ways in which TCGM subgrants could potentially support brownfield projects and how these may be coupled with other funding sources. So for example, while there are a few funding sources that support the development of brownfields inventory, groups could potentially, or projects could potentially be funded through a tier 1 subaward to support the development of brownfield inventory and support of neighborhood revitalization plans. Next. So oftentimes, assessment grants may not include enough funding to fully characterize a site and get it ready for cleanup. Here with a subgrant, a tier 1 subgrant could potentially fund or could be layered with an assessment grant to fully fund site characterization, supporting the transition to cleanup. Next. As I had mentioned, this can be unique, and site purchases and acquisitions are not always eligible expenses under brownfield grants. However, TCGM does offer that as an option under tier 2 and tier 3 projects. So that would be for small land purchases. For the next slide. And so while some brownfield funding may support conceptual site designs, they may not cover a project's need to plan out and determine development costs such as architecture and basic engineering. Excuse me. A TCGM grant may support project development and blueprints for construction or cleanup projects, schematics, and technical development. And so those are just some concrete examples of how TCGM can support brownfield projects, and just wanted to give you all an overview of what that may look like. Next. So as I have mentioned, TCGM may support environmental measurements. And so here I really want to elevate an important note that the EPA is requiring a quality assurance project plan, also referred to, very affectionately referred to as a QAP, before the implementation of any environmental measures for all projects. So a QAP is a planning document that details how the project will meet EPA requirements and project-specific data or program-specific data to generate usable environmental information. So we just want to highlight that, when you're thinking about applying for a TCGM subgrant, please keep in mind that these QAPs can be costly, may require a lot of time to complete. Some projects may require the assistance of outside consultants to complete, but also the QAPs must be approved by the EPA, which can be a timely process in of itself. So we do encourage groups to consider other funding sources that can fulfill that aspect of the project in terms of the environmental measuring process. Next. So, so here's a list of other programs or grant sources that can be layered with a TCGM subgrant to help you fund your projects. Some of these may be able to cover the cost of the environmental measurements without the added step of creating a QAP. So, and just a quick note, this doesn't mean that these are the only funding sources that you can layer with a TCGM subgrant. Rather, it's just a list of programs that may be available to you and that we encourage folks to explore. Next. All right, so Region 9, how do we apply? And so now that you have learned about TCGM and the subgrants, you may feel you are ready to apply. So, and this webinar couldn't be more timely because we are opening up or have opened up our application as of today. So if you visit this website, you should be able to have access to the application. And so two important things that I want to mention in addition to this being open today is that we do not have deadlines for this application. We will be accepting applications on a rolling basis, and selections will be made on a monthly basis. There is one application for all of Region 9. So as I mentioned, there are several of us that are working in a collaborative manner to bring this program to Region 9. And so we are asking folks to just submit one application. We all have access to one system. And so we ask you to use the link provided here to access the submittable portal, which is how folks will be submitting their application. But before you begin the application process, we do ask you to visit sam.gov or sam.gov so that you may create a unique entity identifier or a UEI if you don't have one. And so, but even before you submit an application, we encourage applicants to gather key information such as organizational budgets and other information. The list of other key information will be available in the Region 9 website once the application portal goes live, which is today, which is now, so that should be available. Once you have submitted your application, the system will send an automated message to the applicants to let them know that it's been received. And so we just ask you that once you receive that, you can hold tight. We're still accessible. If you have questions, you can always reach out to your corresponding grant maker. But also just know that we have one coordinated system. So the system will notify us on our end when an applicant from our specific area has submitted an application. So we will coordinate on the back end and distribute the applications. Grant makers are responsible to review the applications corresponding to their service area and will make the awards decision. Expect to hear from grant makers if there are any clarifying questions. But if you don't hear from them, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we are still processing the application. Next. So if you are located in the LA County area, that is my area, Liberty Hill, we will be hosting and we are encouraging potential applicants to register and attend one of our weekly office hours. These drop-in hours are designed to support applicants with any specific inquiries about the applications. We do ask that you please register via Zoom. But you don't, if you are an applicant from another region, or not another region, rather, from Region 9, but from another area that's not LA County, that's fine. You are welcome to join our office hours. We will likely be able to answer any questions that you have, but also direct you to your grant making partner and do a warm handoff. Here we've provided the dates and registration links for the month of January and February, but also encourage you to visit our landing page, our Liberty Hill TCGM page for more information. Next. So I know I've just provided a lot of information, so thank you for hanging, but I do suggest that you look over this presentation, visit all the links provided, especially the Thriving Communities region9.org website. Become familiar with it, read it entirely, and really consider if your project aligns well with TCGM. And consider attending our office hours. And if you still have questions, please go ahead and reach out. So once again, for LA County, you may reach out to myself and members of the Liberty Hill TCGM team via email at thrivingcommunities@libertyhill.org, or go to our webpage. Outside of LA, so I noticed there were a lot of folks outside of LA. I think I saw a couple of folks from Nevada. Please go ahead and reach out to Brittany Coate. She is the EPA Grant Program Manager at Social and Environmental Entrepreneur C, which is our lead grant maker here at Region 9. And she will answer your questions or direct you to your corresponding grant making partner. And here we have a QR code for the Thriving Communities Region 9 webpage. So feel free to make full use of the technology. And yeah, that is it on my end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Araceli, for all that wonderful information. It's very exciting that this program is opening today. So thanks so much again. I am now very pleased to welcome Iris Gonzalez, who is joining us from the Climate Justice Alliance, to give us a little bit of information on the National Thriving Communities Grantmaker and how you can access funding for Region 9 there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jevin. Thank you all for hosting this excellent webinar, and congrats to Araceli for your launch day today. It feels like your birthday or something. And also just sending a lot of love and holding a lot of space for the folks that are affected by wildfires and other climate shocks in LA and around our country. So what I wanted to just spend, I only have 2 slides, and I'm part of the same program that Araceli just explained, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but my name is Iris Gonzalez, and I'm the Senior Technical Officer with a nonprofit organization called Climate Justice Alliance. And Araceli mentioned that as part of the TCGM program that EPA has launched, this is a new program, never been done before, there were 11 grant makers named across the country, and 3 of those 11 grant makers are national grant makers. And so we're serving big areas of the country, and Climate Justice Alliance is the nonprofit that was selected to serve the western part of the US. And so our grant maker program at Climate Justice Alliance is called Unite EJ. And so I work for Climate Justice Alliance, and I'm part of the Unite EJ team. Unite EJ is just the name of our grant making program. So if you Google either of those, you'll get to this information. But we are the national grant maker for National West. And so that means that we are serving Region 9, so all the places and people that Araceli just talked about, but we are also serving Regions 8 and Region 10 of EPA. And so you can see what that geography covers here on this slide. Our role as a national grant maker is to support the excellent work that Araceli and the regional grant makers in 8, 9, and 10 are doing and are launching or have launched. And so you can think of us as being able to fill gaps and support those regional grant makers. That's our primary role, is to fill gaps for them. We will also be re-granting directly to communities. And so we will have our own funding cycles and making grants directly to community applicants. We will have the same 3 tiers that Araceli walked through, the same eligibility requirements that she walked through. So I won't go over any of that. We're all part of the same program. I want to plug here our newsletter. The best way to stay in touch with us and to learn about when our program is launching is to sign up to our newsletter on our website, climatejusticealliance.org/unite-EJ/. And I think we can put that in the chat as well. So next slide, I just want to cover kind of what makes for a good application to us as the national grant maker supporting these 3 regions that are part of the western part of our country. And so these are a couple of sort of examples of the funding priorities that we will have as a national grant maker. So one is if a community applicant has a real or perceived conflict of interest with the regional grant maker. So in this case for Region 9, we know that C has served as a fiscal sponsor, as Araceli mentioned, for a number of organizations. And so there might be a real or perceived conflict of interest to an organization that's currently fiscally sponsored by C to apply to them, so they can apply to us as a national grant maker. That's one example. Another good project to apply to us under this program is a project that serves multiple regions. It might span multiple regions, and at least one of those regions is regions 8, 9, or 10. And so it could be a project that spans 8 and 9, 8 and 2, 9 and 3, etc. But our gap that we're hoping to fill is funding projects that are multi-regional. Any tribal entity, just like for Araceli's program, any tribal entity in regions 8, 9, or 10 can apply to us as well. So you have a choice there of applying either to your regional grant maker or to us as your national grant maker. And then similarly, any community organization that prefers to apply to us over applying to your regional grant maker, you can also do that. In your case, Region 9, as Araceli just said, has a rolling application. In other regions, they have deadlines for their funding cycles. And so it might make sense for someone to apply to us over their regional grant maker, but basically you have a choice. What I will say is that the grant makers are coordinating with each other. And so what we want to avoid is duplication of investments. And so you can apply to us as a national or to your regional, but not for the same project, not for the same body of work. So you'll need to pick one over the other. And then lastly, we're also supporting national organizations or organizations that have maybe a broad geographic footprint. And they might have staff that are in a different part of the country. They might be headquartered in a different part of the country, but their project is based in or will benefit communities that are living in regions 8, 9, and 10. And so those are the funding priorities for us as the national grant maker for National West. And I'll say one last thing before I turn it over, which is that we currently don't have a launch date that we are announcing for our first funding cycle. You may have seen this in the newspapers, but Climate Justice Alliance is the only grant maker that has yet to receive our funds from the EPA. And so we're still awaiting our award. And so we were hoping to launch in January. Because we have not yet received our funds, we are probably going to delay that most likely to mid-March of this year. But the best way to find out when we launch and to learn about what's going on with Unite EJ is to sign up to our newsletter, and then you'll be the first to know when the money becomes available. Thank you, Devin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Edie, for that wonderful download of information. Really a lot of good opportunities here, and we're looking forward to your launch date as well. I'm really excited to follow up this download of info with this list of technical assistance providers that are here to support all of you in going through your applications to the TCGMs. So today we have with us CJ, West EJ, and EPN, the Environmental Protection Network. CJ is the Center for Community Energy and Environmental Justice, and they are one of the 2 Region 9 Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or TICTACs. As I mentioned before and introduced, we have Lauren is here. So Lauren, would you be able to come off mute to introduce yourself and let us know the best way to get involved with CJ, as well as some of the issues that you can help folks with, including the TCGMs?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Devin. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Halili. I'm the program coordinator for CJ. I'm also joined by our program manager, Paige Dawson, who is answering questions in the chat, and we'll be dropping some links in there. As I kind of go through our information, we're really thrilled that the Region 9 Grantmakers application is now open, and we're super excited to provide support for these applications. CJ offers many different technical assistance services, but I would say our most requested services around grant application assistance. While we can't write grants for organizations, we're able to answer questions about the application itself, help you organize all the necessary documents that are needed for your application package. We can review proposals, budgets, and work plans. And if anything else, we can provide access to other technical assistance avenues. So in preparation for TCGM, CJ's been really preparing to provide these services at a higher capacity. And we're super excited to connect with you all. And the best way to do that would be first through our technical assistance web form, but you're also able to send us a direct email to our CJ email, or also leave a voicemail to our number if that's more accessible for you. From there, someone from our team will follow up regarding your request and schedule a one-on-one intake meeting. And that way we can kind of get to know you and your organization, and what it is you're sort of looking for in terms of technical assistance, and most likely for a TCGM. But I'll leave it there for the sake of time. I think Paige is going to be dropping that info in the chat on how to connect with us. So we look forward to hearing from all of you, and I'll pass it back to you, Devin, to introduce my CJ.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. Yeah, so West EJ Center is the second TICTAC for Region 9. Melissa, can you come off mute to introduce yourself and also share the best way to reach your center?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Devin, and thanks again for creating this space. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Melissa Garcia, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for the West Environmental Justice Center, which is the second TICTAC within Region 9. Similar to CJ and what Lauren said, we've been preparing for this opportunity to open, and we've been fortunate enough to work directly with the grant makers for the region alongside CJ to really prepare for this opportunity and to really prepare our team and expand our capacity to support everyone through this process. So like CJ, our most requested type of assistance is, of course, grants. Who doesn't like money, right? So we are working again together to really make sure that we have the capacity to help you all. We can review those proposals, those work plans, work on budgets with you, provide templates that might be helpful as you prepare to apply for this opportunity. And likewise, we are prepared to connect you to people if we can't necessarily provide the assistance that you're looking for. So I'm happy to share our contact information. We usually accept we usually get requests through our contact form on our website, but we also accept calls to our toll-free and emails. And so just know that someone is monitoring all those inboxes and keeping an eye out for the specific opportunity. So please do not hesitate to contact us if you think you need help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. And also I'll say the TICTACs work together and are super collaborative in Region 9. So when it comes to the Thriving Community Grantmakers programs, reaching out to either of the TICTACs, you'll get high quality technical assistance, regardless of who you reach out to. So thank you both for being here. I'd also like to introduce the Environmental Protection Network. They're a partner to both of the TICTACs, and they have their own wealth of resources and capacity to support you in your application process. Michelle is here from EPN, so could you come off mute to introduce yourself and let everyone know about EPN's resources related to TCGMs?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you. I'm Michelle Mukili, and I'm with the Environmental Protection Network. So for our resources, I'm gonna first of all start by saying that at this moment, we're not doing our 101 TA that some of you maybe are potentially know about, but I am gonna go over some of the resources that we have on our website that will help with this opportunity. So the first link I have in the chat, if you can go there, we have our SAM.gov registration hours. And as Araceli mentioned earlier, you need to sign up for SAM.gov to access this money. So we host biweekly office hours. You can sign up. Me and my colleagues usually join and help communities apply for this. The kind of second thing I'm going to highlight is I know we all have mixed feelings around AI, and so this is only if this is something you want to use, is our AI modules. So if you're going to develop that first draft and you really are having trouble trying to figure out where to start, you can potentially use this AI, create a first draft, and then start editing from there, is what I would say. And then the final thing, and honestly, the best resource I think we are providing, and our grants team did a great job putting this together, is our Budgets for Beginners worksheet. Our grants team put that together, broke down a lot of terminology around budgets that might be convoluted. And additionally, they recorded a presentation where one of my colleagues is going through and kind of helping you fill out that budget. Additionally, I'm gonna drop another link in the chat. This is our specific budget link, website link, and on top of the two resources I just discussed, it has an indirect cost calculator. So as you're going to put your budgets together and you need to double check things, and it also is a very helpful resource. So I just wanted to highlight those. And and as a final thing, I want to say that we work closely with CJ. So as we start back running and taking requests again, we will let you all know and we will be able to support you all. But very, very excited that this opportunity is out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Yeah, so this is a big reminder that you don't need to go through these steps of applying to TCGMs alone, but involving your technical assistance providers is a really great way to increase your own capacity. So this is also another reminder that CClear is here to support you in your land reuse projects as well. We are also a partner to the CJ TIC-TAC. So we provide Brownfields technical assistance with them, and also through EPA's technical assistance to Brownfields program. So our staff is also here to support you as well, and you can get into contact with us on our website. Here are other ways to engage with CClear and also your Region 9 technical assistance providers. You can schedule a meeting with CJ at this link. You can also schedule a free meeting with CClear if you would like to talk through your broader land reuse projects. I definitely recommend going through the TIC-TACs to talk through TCGMs. And also, I highly recommend you stay up to date with all of us through our newsletters that are also going to be linked in the chat today. So you can get up-to-date information, especially when Unite EJ opens up their program. You can be alerted through the newsletter. So before we get into questions, I would kind of like to wrap up our presentation with a summary and a hopeful note. Especially thank you, Iris, for acknowledging that there is a devastating disaster going on in our region right now as we're meeting. So really understanding that this work is ongoing and we're all here to work towards this environmentally just future. And the work is far from over, still continuing, and I'm really grateful that all of you are here, while also we're, all acknowledging and understanding that there's this major disaster going on that I'm sure is affecting friends, coworkers, family members. So thank you all for being here today to talk through continuing this work together. And now I would love to go into questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can kind of take a look at some of the questions in the chat here. All right, so I know that some of these questions have been answered in the chat, so thank you so much to our speakers and guests that have been answering questions. But I see some that have been not yet answered. So from Catherine, had the question, what kind of emergency preparedness programs would qualify? And I'm assuming you're talking about the TCGMs. So if anyone would like to take on that question, that'd be great. Araceli, are you able to answer?
Let's see. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so this is from Catherine, who asked what kind of emergency preparedness programs would qualify with TCGM?
That's a good question. I think, because it is such a broad program, that as long as there's connection with that EJ component, it could be something that could definitely be considered. So sometimes it's about the narrative, right? So I would say that programs that involve the community input and primarily could definitely be a potential grantee.
And
Yeah, thank you.
I would just add, I think, like Araceli said, that's a really broad category. I could envision projects under each of the 3 tiers that could fall under disaster preparedness. So whether it's about sort of like community education or leadership or building coalition, or if it's about sort of like securing land to have, a hub or a gathering place for folks in times of emergency. Those could be a tier 1 or a tier 3 project. So I think it really just depends on what you're doing, but I think, like Araceli said, that has a lot of alignment with EJ. And these dollars that, this innovative program is really meant to reach places that have not historically received investment. And so I think that would be, that is one of the most compelling parts of an application.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that response. Maki asked the question, what is the maximum amount we can request? For example, if we are applying for a tier 2 and 3 in one project, can the project be a 2-year project for $250K plus another 2-year project? I might want to, Maki, if you want to come off mute and ask this question with your example, and Lou Jane is also going to put it back in the chat, just so you can kind of share what you're working on here. With the general question, I think being, what is the maximum amount we can request for a project? Is there a maximum number of years and an amount that we can request? I think if Maki's not here anymore, Araceli, would you be able to answer, or Edith?
Sure, and this is, I'll say that each grant maker is a little bit different. We each have a different, slightly different way to handle this, but for the national TCGM Unite EJ, we are going to be reviewing applications from an organization one at a time. And so an applicant would need to submit an application based on whichever tier they're applying for, and that would be reviewed one at a time. We do have a maximum cap of only funding 2 awards to any one single organization over our 3 years of grant making. So that's our maximum number, and I think other grant makers have a different maximum number.
We have a maximum number of 5. And that also applies for fiscal sponsors.
Thank you. All right, so for some specific Unite EJ questions, Jessica asks, do you have any micro grant or stimulation relief grants with a simple application for 2025.
Under this TCGM program, there is something we didn't really talk about, which is a non-competitive subaward. And again, this is I don't know how Araceli you're doing it, but I can speak on how we're doing it. But there are a limited number, so we have it's a smaller amount that we're allocating towards non-competitive subawards, and those would be in the amount of up to $75,000. And those will be provided to organizations that are still growing their capacity towards managing federal dollars, or just growing their capacity in general. And so those will not be competitive. There will be no application for them on our website. The grant review panel will make a determination if an application is better suited for that non-competitive award, and then we'll reach out to the applicant to make that offer. And the community will have a choice to opt in or opt out of that. But we do have that available as sort of a micro grant. And then I believe in other parts of our organization as Climate Justice Alliance, we do make micro grants for emergency relief, but that's not a part of the TCGM program we're talking about today.
Yeah, so we will also be offering non-competitive grants and awards that are also going to be up to $75,000. And for Region 9, we will be approaching the groups, and there won't be an application process, but we are going to ask them to complete a form. And these are for small capacity groups. And so for anyone who may have a question about that, please go ahead and email the Thriving Communities at LibertyHill.org, and I can give you all more information.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. So Wyatt asked, our organization has a DTSC ECRG site investigational grant, and we are looking for a cleanup grant in the 7 figures. Are any grants that have been covered, are any grants in this potential range?
I would say that they could definitely be combined with other sources as part of the 7 figures, but we wouldn't be able to necessarily cover the full amount.
Awesome, thank you. Cheryl asks, is tribal entity referring specifically to government entities? What if it is a CBO established and located on tribal lands? Yeah, and I believe there was another question about tribal entities, if a tribal entity had to be a recognized tribe.
So the way that EPA is interpreting this and their definition of tribe for this program, both federally recognized and state recognized tribes are eligible entities to apply. There could also be a partnership between 2 or more tribes that could apply. And then Native American organizations, including Native groups, cooperatives, and partnerships, can also apply. If they are a nonprofit that's applying on behalf of a tribal government or tribal entity, they must have authority to enter into legal agreements. But those are all of the sort of types of entities that are considered eligible applicants for this program. I can put that in the chat too.
Awesome, thank you. Matt, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to come off mute to ask your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask real quick with regards to tribal. We're looking at a coalition application where a single member of about 5 or 6 of us is, recognized tribe. But it's not intent, it's to provide training and pay for training from that tribe. So as a member of a coalition, it's not explicitly just conducted in tribal territory, or they would be a subaward. So I guess I'm asking, how would an application like that be segmented? Because if it's going to automatically fall into the tribal category, you write a different grant. Right. Is that clear?
I think so. Can you say more? Is the coalition incorporated or are they any kind of organization?
Yeah, it's a 10-year-old. It's California Environmental Justice Coalition. The grant is about EJ communities training each other without agency interference. And, we have we have the same issues across several communities and really would like to stop learning the same things over and over again.
Makes
So the
sense.
tribe's just a member. It's not explicitly about, I think their issue is the fugitive dust issue. But it's a collaboration with the tribe. So I wanted to evaluate whether or not they should apply for their portion on their own or do it as part of this coalition application. Or maybe a simpler question to ask are there different allotments for tribal and for the EJ tiers? I think I missed ceilings or total funds available.
We are in Region 9, we do have some allocations for the different regions, or the different areas rather.
Mhm.
And yes, we do have a different allocation for Native entities that in our case don't have to be recognized
Right.
federally or statewide. So we are accepting applications from non-recognized groups that could apply also as nonprofits or under fiscal sponsorship.
Got that. Maybe a less confusing question would be to compete in the allocation for tribal applicants, would they need to be the lead applicant? The
Not
tribes themselves.
necessarily.
Okay, great.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Thank you. Are we still foggy on ceiling numbers and projected numbers of awards? Or has that been shared?
Hasn't
For
been
any
shared
of the
on our
tiers?
end.
Copy. Thank
And same for us. We don't have a set aside for tribal to fund tribal applications. We do have some internal goals and targets. But we're trying to kind of be as open and flexible and adaptable as possible. And so it sounds like depending on how the coalition may either apply in different ways. And it sounds like it might even be good to pull up the slide that Araceli had about eligibility. As long as you meet the eligibility requirements, that's what we'd be looking for.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got one more question I see that has not been answered in the chat. And if we did not get to your question, go ahead and raise your hand, or you can also contact any of us and we can get back to you with an answer. So Heather asks, our team in Northern Santa Barbara County has an MOU and is working on a reuse site currently owned by a local school district to redevelop into low-income / workforce housing, which is surplus property redevelopment. Would a project like this qualify for funding?
It could potentially qualify if they fit any of the qualification criteria, like can they apply through a nonprofit or even through, I don't know what the dynamics are of that relationship, but even through the district, if that's possible. Does that answer the question?
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, thank you, Heather. All right, as we are at 15 minutes after the hour exactly, and I believe we got through all questions. Again, if we missed your question or you still have questions, please reach out to Araceli or Iris and myself or your TikToks. We will also be sending a follow-up email with the recording and all of the slides, as well as all of the links that were shared in the chat and on the slides are going to be in the follow-up email as well. So you will definitely be able to respond to that email with questions as well. We're here for you. Thank you all so much for joining, and I hope everyone is staying safe. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining.